Shortly after I was elected to the Indiana House of Representatives, one of my new colleagues offered me some friendly advice. Never get in a fight with people who buy ink by the barrel. That phrase is a warning to anyone in public office to not get on the bad side of a newspaper. Newspapers no longer have the power they once held, so the modern equivalent of that expression might be, never get in a fight with people who buy network servers by the acre. That sounds like good advice, but I didn't follow it 30 years ago, so why should I start now? I am Dr. Jon Padfield, an engineer turned state representative turned business professor, and this is Business Reform, where we discuss issues at the intersection of business, technology, and society. If you would like to support my work in bringing you informative, sponsor-free videos, I invite you to buy me a coffee using this QR code or the link in the description. This video is the second of 3 related videos. My first video in this series dealt with the general concept of profiling as practiced by both private companies and governments to put people on a wide variety of lists for an even wider variety of purposes. My third video in this series, which should be out within the next few days, is about social credit scores, or as I call them, the scarlet number, the modern equivalent of the scarlet letter. Over the past 3 years, I have made and uploaded over 100 videos to this channel, but this video has been my most challenging one to date. Researching Palantir wasn't all that difficult, although much of what they do is classified. It was writing the script for this video that I struggled with. I strive to present a balanced perspective in all of my videos, but I found doing so in this video to be challenging. For what it's worth, I do not use any AI to write my scripts. I will occasionally use AI to create an image if I can't find a suitable image using one of the royalty-free image services I subscribe to, and I use AI to create a summary of my video that I post in the description of my videos. But I write all of my scripts myself based on my own research using mainstream media sources such as Forbes and the Wall Street Journal, trade journals, and peer-reviewed academic papers. And for my product reviews, I do my own real-world testing. But getting back to Palantir, according to the Wall Street Journal, the story of Palantir starts in 2003 when PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel pitched an idea to his college buddy Alexander Karp. Both Thiel and Karp earned their Juris Doctor degrees from Stanford Law School in 1992. Thiel's idea was to create software to uncover terror networks using an approach PayPal had developed to detect fraudulent transactions. In 2004, Thiel and Karp co-founded Palantir with 3 other investors, but the startup costs were largely covered by Thiel's venture capital fund. According to the U.S. government website, USAspending.gov, just 5 years later in 2009, while it was still a privately held company, Palantir was awarded its first federal government contract for $1.6 million. But that was just the tip of the proverbial iceberg. Over the next 10 years, between 2010 and 2019, Palantir was awarded another 150 federal contracts, with many of those contracts being worth tens of millions of dollars and one contract being worth over $275 million. I find it interesting that when they were awarded a $42 million contract by ICE, an article in NextGov, a part of the Government Executive Media Group, described them as, quote, secretive data mining firm Palantir. Palantir went public 5 years ago on September 30, 2020, with their stock closing that day at $9.50 per share, giving it a market cap around $16 billion. As of Friday, September 26, 2025, Palantir was trading around $177 per share, and its market cap was in the ballpark of $300 billion. Palantir's stock has nearly quadrupled in value since last November's presidential election. That growth in stock price has been fueled in large part by the Trump administration awarding 51 contracts to Palantir, collectively worth $578 million, over just the past 9 months. From an investor perspective, Palantir is a 21-year-old, highly successful, publicly traded data analytics company that has made a lot of money working for both the United States government and for corporations across a wide cross-section of industries, including General Mills, AARP, Lowe's, United Airlines, and Cummins. So what gives them the dark, sinister vibe that many people associate with them today? There are several things that make people uneasy about them, so let's examine them in chronological order, starting with Peter Thiel himself. I want to be fair in my quotes of Thiel, and I have included a link in the description to his 2009 article in Cato Unbound, which is a publication of the libertarian think tank, the Cato Institute. Thiel states he is against confiscatory taxes and totalitarian collectives. I am with him on those 2 points. But he loses me when he expresses his skepticism about the inevitability of death. He then states that for all these reasons he calls himself a libertarian. I'm sorry, but I can't let that go unchallenged. Peter Thiel's venture capital funds have invested heavily in Flock Surveillance, a company that wasn't content tracking you everywhere you go and creating a database of your bumper stickers, but it recently opened a 97,000 square foot drone manufacturing facility. Thiel funding the creation of a surveillance state and claiming to be a libertarian is as believable as Prime Minister Starmer claiming to be anti-censorship and pro-privacy. But one of the more controversial things Thiel wrote in that article is, quote, "Most importantly, I no longer believe freedom and democracy are compatible." This statement implies Thiel wants to replace democracy with something else. Before I go any further, I fully understand the United States is not a democracy, and I am thankful we were established as a constitutional republic. Just for the purpose of keeping this video a little bit shorter, I am going to use the term democracy because I want to quote the words of Sir Winston Churchill, who told Parliament, quote, "Democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others that have been tried from time to time." I could go on for several more minutes quoting Thiel's disparaging remarks about democracy, but he never explains what he wants to replace it with, and that justifiably makes a lot of people nervous. Next, let's look at why Peter Thiel chose the name Palantir and this symbol that looks like a sphere on a pedestal for his company logo. There is a common stereotype that technology nerds are really into sci-fi and fantasy books and movies. I have no idea where people get these ideas. In 2023, Peter Thiel told The Atlantic that he read J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings trilogy at least 10 times while growing up. Although I agree with Jack Butler at National Review that I don't think Thiel really understands the Lord of the Rings. J.R.R. Tolkien was a devout Roman Catholic, and he called the Lord of the Rings a, quote, fundamentally religious and Catholic work. The trilogy embodies providence as key events often turn on grace and mercy and the choices made by seemingly insignificant characters. The Lord of the Rings also has strong moral themes throughout, such as the struggle between good and evil, the danger of pride and power, and the virtues of humility and sacrifice. I believe Thiel was and is oblivious to those themes in the trilogy. In the Lord of the Rings books, a Palantir was a crystal seeing stone about the size of a bowling ball, what some people might think of as a fortune teller's crystal ball. They allowed their users to communicate and see across great distances. Palantirs could also be used for surveillance, and when Gandalf, the wise and heroic wizard, obtained a Palantir, he kept it covered so other people using Palantirs could not see where he was and what he was doing. So far so good. The Palantir logo looks like a seeing stone from the movie, and the company is all about surveillance and seeing things remotely, so the name seems consistent with Thiel's company. But the stones have a dark and dangerous aspect to them. Gandalf warns that while the stones don't lie, they can be used to deceive by only showing part of the truth or framing things in a misleading way. Using a Palantir almost like a Ouija board, Gandalf's friend and fellow wizard, Saruman, was corrupted and started serving the forces of evil. Saruman represents corruption of wisdom by pride and lust for power. When Peter Thiel chose Palantir for the name of his company, he either didn't understand the danger of a Palantir, or worse yet, understood it and embraced it. Beyond Thiel himself and the history and symbolism of the name Palantir, the next thing that gives his company a dark and sinister vibe is that according to Forbes and the investment research firm Brownstone Research, Just 1 year after Palantir was founded, the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency invested millions of dollars in them. As always, links to all my sources are in the description. Those millions of dollars in a privately held startup company really helped cash flow and allowed Palantir to hire more people and build software tools so they could start bidding on government contracts. And for some people, the 10 contracts Palantir was awarded by ICE for a total of $254 million doesn't do anything to improve their reputation. But I believe the biggest factor in their dark and sinister vibe goes back to a Department of Defense program in 2017 called Project Maven, which was also known as the Algorithmic Warfare Cross-Functional Team. 4 contracts were let for this project, and a company called ECS Federal was the prime contractor for the project. The goal of Project Maven was to accelerate the adoption of AI across the Department of Defense, with a huge emphasis on using AI to monitor drone and satellite video feeds in real time to identify and classify targets on the ground, including buildings, vehicles, and people. While ECS Federal was the prime contractor, they hired Google as a subcontractor to take advantage of Google's image recognition expertise and to integrate Google's AI into the Department of Defense's weapons targeting systems. If you think building artificial intelligence into weapons targeting systems sounds like a famous 1984 action movie, I want to assure you this is not Skynet. It's just Skynet's little brother. Skynet had the ability to autonomously fire weapons, whereas the AI in Project Maven only has the ability to determine what should cease to exist and to point weapons platforms at it. But it still requires a human to push a button to put warheads on foreheads. Google's decision to accept a $9 million 18-month contract to be part of Project Maven triggered a severe backlash within Google. Over 4,000 Google employees signed a letter to the company's leadership opposing Google's involvement in Project Maven. Additionally, at least a dozen senior engineers resigned in protest over Google's involvement in Project Maven. A case study written about the fallout from Google's decision to get involved with Project Maven claimed the follow-on contract for the next phase of the project was anticipated to be $250 million, but Google's leadership decided to not renew the contract when it expired. Google also published a set of AI principles in 2018 that forbid their AI from being used in weapons and human rights violations. Over the past 6 years, Google has lost nearly $3 billion in privacy-related lawsuits and government fines. But in 2018, Google decided there were some lines they wouldn't cross. You may be wondering what happened to Project Maven after Google abandoned it. Well, that's where Palantir comes in. They were happy to take over the project and help integrate their AI into drone targeting systems. And how is that working out for everyone? I want to be extremely careful in my wording of this next part. Here is what we know for fact. Palantir began working on integrating their AI into drone video feeds in 2019 to help identify targets, but the decision to fire on a given target was still a human decision. We also know that Palantir has continued to receive hundreds of millions of dollars in subsequent DoD contracts to continue this work in what is now called Maven Smart System. On their own website, Palantir brags about their software product called Gotham, which they describe as, quote, the operating system for global decision-making. Palantir describes Gotham's targeting as, quote, an AI-powered kill chain seamlessly and responsibly integrating target identification and target effector pairing. I normally censor the K word in my videos to keep the YouTube algorithm happy, but I want everyone to see how clearly Palantir describes their role. For anyone unfamiliar with the term target effector, it means a system that has the desired effect on the target, so in the case of a vehicle traveling down the road, Gotham might pair a drone-launched Hellfire missile with the vehicle to produce the desired effect. According to Palantir, Gotham streamlines critical decision-making in the modern battle space so decisions can be made more quickly. Keep that thought in mind as we take a trip down memory lane to August 26, 2021. An attack at the Abbey Gate entrance to the Kabul airport claimed the lives of 13 American servicemen and women and at least 169 Afghan civilians. 3 days later, on August 29, a U.S. drone fired a Hellfire missile at a white Toyota Corolla the U.S. Department of Defense had determined to be part of a terror network. But they were wrong. That Hellfire missile took the lives of 10 innocent Afghan civilians, including 7 children. The official explanation was that the interpretation of intelligence was inaccurate. Do I know for absolute certain that Gotham or Maven were involved in targeting that white Toyota Corolla and the resulting loss of life? No, I don't, because
the report of investigation is classified, and I know you're probably not happy about that, but let me tell you it has to be, because the methods, sources and methods and techniques and procedures used in executing such strikes are classified.
What I do know is this type of threat identification is exactly what Palantir had been working on integrating into the U.S. military drone program for years prior to that incident, to streamline decision-making and facilitate a faster kill chain from threat identification to threat elimination. I believe these reasons that I have just shared are a major part of the reason why so many people look at Palantir with suspicion. And I haven't even gotten into Palantir's role in predictive policing or the contract the Trump administration gave them earlier this year to compile dossiers on millions of innocent Americans. I am going to have to save those topics for a follow-up video because I don't want this video to get too long. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss my next video in this series about social credit scores. I also have several public speaking events coming up, including the Great Create Freedom Festival on November 8th in Ackworth, Georgia, and 2 Brush Fires of Freedom tour stops in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and Chicago, Illinois. The Brush Fire tour stops are free to attend, and the Chicago event will be sometime in the first half of November. I will be posting details on both events at brushfirestour.com as soon as the details are finalized. Beyond predictive policing and the dossiers Palantir has been hired to build on all of us, what else should I cover in my follow-up video on Palantir? I can't wait to read your comments.